The Bible is not secretive on the characteristics of the world in the last days before the second coming of Christ. Jesus makes it very clear of the things that you will see in the world before he appears the second time to humanity. And the scriptures tell us if we are living in those days where we see these things described by Christ and described all throughout the scriptures, the book of Thessalonians, Matthew chapter 24, obviously the book of Revelation. When we see all of these things take place, if we happen to be the people living in that last generation, that we should watch for his second coming. As a matter of fact, the scriptures tell us if we don't watch that he will come upon us like a thief. Revelation chapter 3 verse 3 says, "If therefore thou shalt not watch, I will come upon thee as a thief, and thou shalt not know what hour I will come upon thee." So if we are living in what is clearly the last generation, and as Christians we know that we are living in those times, beyond a shadow of a doubt, we're commanded to watch, to continue looking for visible signs that suggest Christ will be coming soon. Now, all throughout history, some people think they have gotten it right. Now, while in the past some people have suggested the rapture will take place on a certain date, according to crunching certain numbers together from the scriptures, adding this with that, looking throughout history, so many days after this period, so many days before this period, so many days after this event takes place, and so on and so forth. Well, that's been the most popular way that the rapture dates in the past have been calculated, and of course we know they've been wrong. But now there's an ever-growing popular belief concerning the approaching of the rapture, not by the calculating together of certain numbers, rather from an interpretation directly from the scriptures themselves. So let's take a look at it and see if this theory holds water. It's been dubbed as the Revelation 12 sign, and of course it comes from Revelation chapter 12, beginning at verse 1. "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she being with child cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born." So what does this have to do with September and October of 2017, which is coming up fairly soon, and more specifically September the 23rd? Well, the theory is actually quite simple. Now, whether the rapture takes place on or after these dates, well, that's another story. Now, let's be clear that it's not certain that the rapture is the claim attached to this Revelation 12 sign. However, looking at the detailed elements of this sign, it does indeed suggest a strong potentiality of the rapture event around this time period. Actually, the only way to know is to see if it comes to pass. So to begin, let's go to Matthew chapter 24 and verse 30 concerning the time when Christ will return. "And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory." So that first part of this verse, "and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven." So we have two parts here. The sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then evidently shortly after that shall the Son of Man himself come in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Now, notice in chapter 24, after he said the sign of the Son of Man, they didn't ask him, what is the sign of the Son of Man? Possibly because they knew it was obviously the prophecy of his coming the first time. Now, the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And remember, there's no concrete answer to any of this. It's written in the scriptures for a reason, obviously not to ignore it, but to do something with it, to figure out what it is. The sign of the Son of Man itself, there alone, to understand what that is, we have to go to Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14. "Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." Now this verse is clearly talking about the birth of Jesus Christ. So they probably knew what the sign of the Son of Man was. They were just unaware of when this would take place in heaven. So there you have the sign of the Son of Man. Now this sign was concerning the first coming of Christ. But what Matthew chapter 24 and verse 30 is telling us, that this sign of the Son of Man will be visible from heaven. And that is where Revelation chapter 12 verse 1 comes from. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. Now the first part, a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun. If you look at this chart, you can see the constellation Virgo in heaven, which means virgin, Virgo. You can see above her shoulder, she is clothed with the sun. How is she clothed with the sun? Well, if the sun is on her shoulder, the brightness of the sun will clothe the entirety of Virgo. And the verse continues, and the moon under her feet. Well, you can look at this constellation Virgo and see the moon is under her feet. Now, mind you, all of this is taking place on September the 23rd, 2017. That is this alignment that you're seeing right now. The sun at her shoulder, the moon at her feet. Now let's continue with Revelation chapter 12. And upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Now you can see in this diagram here, above the constellation Virgo is the constellation Leo, which generally has 9 stars. So if you just look at the 9 stars alone, you don't necessarily see a crown above Virgo's head. It'd be an oddly shaped crown, not a crown. It's lacking its completeness. But you can see on September the 23rd, 2017, Venus, Mars, and Mercury make an appearance in the constellation Leo, completing the crown of 12 stars, making a crown above Virgo's head, thus completing the Revelation chapter 12 sign, wherein it says upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And verse 2 says, and she being with child cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered. Again, on September the 23rd, 2017, you can see Jupiter here, which is the largest planet in the area of Virgo, representing the child that is about to be born out of Virgo. Completing verse 2, which says, and she being with child, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered. Note that she's not yet delivered. Jupiter's still there. In Revelation chapter 12, she is about to be delivered. Let me just note that Jupiter, representing the child which is about to be delivered, entered into the constellation Virgo 9 months prior to this event, which, as you know, is the time period a woman is pregnant. On September the 23rd, 2017, you have all of this alignment. So what makes all of this interesting is all of this alignment here on September the 23rd, 2017 has never before ever happened in history. And what makes it even more interesting is all of this alignment that you're seeing here, the moon at her feet, her clothed with the sun here, the 12 stars above her head, Jupiter, all of that will never happen again in history. The only day when all of this alignment will ever take place. So the idea is fairly simple. It's very compelling to believe that this alignment on September the 23rd, 2017 is actually the great wonder in heaven mentioned in Revelation chapter 12. In fact, so compelling that there's nothing missing. Everything that you see in Revelation chapter 12, verse 1, verse 2, all of these verses with perfection describes what's going to happen on September the 23rd. So therefore, this September the 23rd, 2017 alignment screams Revelation chapter 12. So compelling that if you take chapter 12, verses 1 and 2 and 3 literal, this is the actual event that will take place. But where does the rapture come in at with the taking place of this event? Well, as we read Revelation chapter 12, verses 1, talking about the great wonder in heaven, and verses 2, she's travailing in birth, pain to be delivered. Verse 3, there appeared another wonder in heaven, a great red dragon with 7 crowns upon his head. And verse 4, his tail drew a third of the stars from heaven, cast him to the earth. He stood before the woman, ready to devour the child as soon as it's delivered. Next here in verse 5, and she brought forth a man-child. Okay, this is the part where if this constellation on September the 23rd is Revelation chapter 12, the sign of Revelation chapter 12, this is the point when Jupiter, which represents the child, is delivered out of Virgo. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. So there's where the rapture of the church potentially comes in at, and her child was caught up unto God, as verse 5 says. Caught up in other parts of the scriptures is relating to the rapture of the church. More specifically, the other part of the scriptures where caught up is used is 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 16 and 17. We read, "For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord." So there you have it. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up. That's the point of rapture. This is clearly a potentially historic point in Bible prophecy. And in our lifetime, in our generation, we can see this entire prophecy coming together in perfect descriptive form. No guesswork, no parts where something's missing. You have part 1, the great wonder in heaven, the woman clothed with the sun. Part 2, the moon under her feet. Part 3, upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Part 4, she being with child, travailing in birth, pain to be delivered, and so on and so forth. All of these parts are going to happen on September the 23rd, 2017. Now we should make a note again, she's travailing in birth, ready to be delivered. And it appears to me on September the 23rd, she's ready to be delivered. She hasn't actually delivered the child, but the child will be delivered shortly thereafter. So as a very watchful Christian, and all Christians around the world who are waiting for this event to take place, basically on the edge of your seat, because we've seen nothing like this ever in history. A different kind of hope that we've never seen before. And as events continue to unravel between now and then, seeing the quality and surety of the unfolding of this prophecy, be watchful, as Revelation chapter 3 verse 3 tells us to do, so that we are not caught unaware. Now I think it's noteworthy to mention, as compelling as all of this is, we just don't know with 100% certainty that on September the 23rd, 2017, that the Revelation 12 sign will occur. But if this is truly it, we have something major on our hands, a major prophecy that is about to unfold. Now you have two sides of the fence. You have one group of people who is absolutely opposed to any rapture theory that may arise. They'll tell you to stay away from them, not to entrust in them, none whatsoever. Almost they're telling you not to even watch for the coming of the Lord. Just let time proceed and things will fall into place as they will. And then on the other side of the fence, you have a group of people who will fall for a rapture theory hook, line, and sinker. If you're on the first group where you're very much against any rapture theories, you very well may not be watching at all for the coming of Jesus Christ. You're against any theories, you're potentially not watching at all. Now in the other group, you're just waiting for the rapture to occur according to the last failed rapture theory that was popular at the moment, and you're currently waiting on the rapture to occur according to the current rapture theory. Reasonably speaking, neither of those two groups are positions that we should take. Simply put, logic suggests keep an open mind. You have to watch because the scriptures commands us to watch. If, indeed, we know we are living in the last days. Now, Christ tells us when we know we're living in those days to watch. And another issue arises. We don't know if this Revelation 12 sign, if it does occur this year, we don't know if that is even connected to the rapture. We don't know what's going to happen. We just know that a major prophecy is unfolding before our very eyes in this generation. Now, this could be one of the biggest revelations in history, being cast out to all Christians who have been and are truly waiting for the coming of Jesus Christ. We truly have some substance here, clear evidence that we are definitely living in what is probably the time right before the coming of Jesus Christ, and that we see a major prophecy, maybe the greatest prophecy of the end times, unfolding before our very eyes in the heavens. Step by step, piece by piece, nothing missing. Redemption of true Christians all around the world who are waiting for the coming of Christ is upon us. And what I say unto you, I say unto all, watch.